Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this evening's launch of this beautiful Stoic collection. It's really interesting. I was just looking at what Sonia said tonight. I'm going to try to make it a little bit interactive. It should only take about 40 minutes or so. I want to make it a little bit interactive, so please post your comments. I'm going to be looking at this. And Sonia, I actually agree. It's two of my favorite topics, well, it's two of my favorite passions, and that is philosophy and aromatherapy. And I hate to sound naive, but I'm fairly new, especially to Stoicism, and I will explain my journey of discovering Stoicism and how I realized, oh my God, this is a perfect marriage for aromatherapy and this incredible philosophy. And also, there's a little bit of, I suppose, historical connection, cultural connection for myself, having an Italian background. Sean, can I please have the screen up? So let me start this beautiful journey about the connection between aromatherapy and Stoicism and how I came up with these three essential oil blends. Now, in order to do this, I do have to give you a little bit of a background briefing into this incredible philosophy known as Stoicism. And I must say that the word, I must admit myself, when I first started exploring Stoicism, I made the connection with the actual word that we've now appropriated to be Stoic. And that means almost like to not being able to express our feelings or emotions. For example, what I learned was that Stoicism is it's the opposite spectrum of that. It just means knowing how to deal with the hard knocks when we experience them. Now, I must admit also, and it came from one of our staff who said, oh, they asked our amazing graphic designer, or is that an image of Sal on the box of the Stoic collection? No, it is not an image of Sal, but it's wonderful, isn't it? That is an image of one of the most famous of all the Stoic philosophers. He was the emperor of the Roman Empire at the time, and he's considered one of the more benevolent emperors. That is Marcus Aurelius. Probably we are related somewhere down the line. Well, I would like to think so. Okay, so why Stoicism? As I said before, our purpose at Perfect Potion is to help people to flourish. And when you start doing a little bit of research into what Stoicism as a philosophy emphasizes, it focuses on living in the present moment. It's like being mindful. And probably one of the key things is accepting what we cannot control. And thirdly, there are many others, but I'm just going to give you a brief overview. It is finding true happiness. And for the Stoic philosophers, true happiness can be found in virtue. So we will explore this notion of virtues very soon. And indeed, the three essential oils are based on virtues associated with Stoicism. I do love the words of Epictetus when he referred to Stoicism as therapy for the soul. That was my aha moment. I went, oh my God, really? Is this true? Because guess what? As far as I'm concerned, essential oils nourish the soul. Essential oils are therapy for the soul. So therefore, I realized, oh my God, what a beautiful symbiotic relationship between Stoicism and aromatherapy. So it was up to me to find the patterns that existed and the relationship. Now, I've got my trusted Sean, who is helping me tonight, and my little arrow cursor is not working, Sean, so I can't change the slide.
Try now.
sorry, everyone, we won't be too long. Okay. So, did you do that or I do that?
We'll talk about that.
Okay. We will on with the show. Now, in my research into Stoicism, which began actually now beginning of last year, I just recently came across this beautiful introduction to one of the books on Stoicism. And here John Stella says, what if someone told you that much of the suffering in our life was simply due to the way we think about things? And here he's not talking about the physical suffering, the pain, the hunger, but all the negative challenges, all the challenges that we deal with in life that lead to anxiety, to frustration, to disappointment, to anger, to fear. What if somebody claimed that they could show you a way of avoiding all of this? Now, this is easier said than done. Okay, if it's not, you're just going to read a book on Stoicism and all of a sudden you'll be in this right place. It's not going to happen that way. But there are activities that you can do. There is the essential oils, I believe, will act as a catalyst for being able to understand a lot of the philosophies embodied within Stoicism. So Stella goes on to say, and what if they said, and they are obviously the Stoic philosophers said, what if these things were in fact a product of looking at the world in a mistaken way? And what if it turns out that we have the ability to be able to manage or control, that all these things are really in our control? So in that sense, and I think I do believe that if the ancient Greek philosophers and the Roman philosophers were looking at where the pathway that philosophy has taken, they would be extremely disappointed, because the way that they saw philosophy, the way that it should have been taught, was that it was a practical philosophy. It was a philosophy that would help us to deal and give us guidance whenever we experience any challenges in life. So it's not surprising, for example, that and much of what we know, and I'll explain this, much of what we know about the philosophers now is the Greek philosophy, the Stoicism was started with in Greece, but there's not any written text about the Greek philosophers. Of course, the Greek philosophers, what they taught us, influenced the Roman philosophers. And we only have three recordings, 3 books that were ever written. And one of them was not even meant to be a book, or most of them weren't even meant to be a book. And I'll explain this very, very soon. But what I was going to get to is that the Roman emperors would often feel quite threatened by these philosophers, because the philosophers challenged the status quo. They challenged the emperors, especially those emperors that weren't leading the country in the right direction. And so the Stoic philosophers in particular were very outspoken, because they believed that everybody had the right to lead a good life. And so they were often exiled. Quite an interesting scenario. So I just want to start off by introducing you the Stoic philosophers in particular. What's written, they're very quotable. The books that are available, they're very easy to read. Try to get a more contemporary book written by the philosophers, because these books, remember, have existed for over 2,000 years. So they've been translated many, many times. But Epictetus, for example, and the key thing here to remember is some things are in our control and others are not. So let's expand on that. So what does Epictetus mean when he says that? So for example, Epictetus says that the things that are in our control is our opinion, it's our desire, our aversion, and in one word, whatever are our own actions. However, Epictetus goes on to say, the things that are not in our control are our body, our property, our reputation, our command, and in one word, whatever are not our own actions. It's important to remember this. And many of the contemporary translations of Stoicism really focus on this element, helping us to understand this. And indeed, Stoicism has become the foundation, for example, of cognitive behavioral therapy, a very important form of psychotherapy. And it's all based on this one particular statement. Some things are in our control and others are not. Seneca, he's another philosopher, one of the other Stoics that I really enjoy reading. And Seneca says, for example, it is not what we have, but what we enjoy that makes us happy. Interesting, wise words. On the other hand, Marcus Aurelius, who was the emperor of the largest and most powerful empire in the world at the time, and by the way, he was regarded as one of the more benevolent emperors, one of the better emperors, because Rome had a real dodgy lot of emperors, we must admit, that were very, very terrible. But Marcus Aurelius says, happiness is not achieved by possessing great wealth, power, and fame. So the focus is on happiness. And the words that the Greeks used and even the Romans used, this is a more modern translation, would have been eudaimonia. And we'll talk about that very soon. It is achieved by living in harmony with your true self. Once again, very, very wise words. Now, Stoicism, you go, what relevance does a 2,000-year-old philosophy have in contemporary times? Perhaps, and when you have a look at most of the books that are being published on Stoicism, and everything from little self-help guides to academics who teach philosophy at university, there's a plethora of books that are available nowadays on Stoicism. And by the way, at the end, you'll find a link or a QR code to, I got excited preparing a whole lot of information. And so you'll be able to download that blog and have a read of that blog if you really want to get your teeth into understanding Stoicism, and especially how it can help you. But for example, so most of the books were published from around 2000 to 2020. How interesting. What happened in 2020? Of course, we know the pandemic. So I believe that Stoicism has made this comeback because it's actually helped us to deal with the fallout, with, first of all, during the pandemic, what happened, and then, of course, as the fallout of the pandemic. But Stoicism has been often cited as helping people in very challenging times. This particular person, United States Navy Vice Admiral James Bond Stockdale, studied Epictetus while he was at Stanford University. He claims, and he states, not he claims, he states that Epictetus helped him for the 7 years that he was held captive in what was referred to as the Hanoi Hilton. And because of the person in his position, he was regularly and constantly tortured, but he survived and he went on. And now, I believe, from what I've understood, Stoicism is actually taught in various aspects of the military. As I said, there are now so many books on Stoicism, and all of them seem to promise that they will deliver us happiness, they will help us deal with our stress, and they will help us to achieve a good life. They will promote resilience and promote inner peace. This the cynical side of me went, interesting that Stoicism never became like this cult or religion, and it didn't need to. It was always a philosophy. But guess what? I have no doubt that it did influence many spiritual Christian, not only just Christianity, but you see the parallels between Buddhism, between Christianity, and so many religions, you'll see, because it's all about how to lead and achieve a good life. Now, as I said, there are many books available, but if you want to get right down to the essence of Stoicism, there are 3 books available. The first one is Epictetus, and his book is called Discourses. Now, he, for example, he never actually wrote this. One of his students did. But most of the philosophers at the time did not bother to write because they simply taught. It was a verbal teaching, and one of their students had written down all of Epictetus's teaching. So we're thankful to one of his students that all his work still survives. I suppose Epictetus would have been what you would call it's referred to as group therapy or a self-help workshop. And indeed, I kind of cringe at the thought of Stoicism being promoted as some form of self-help. Indeed, I suppose that's what it would have been. Now, meditations, can you imagine? Marcus Aurelius never actually wrote this to be a book. It was his personal journal. How many of you journal? And by the way, it is so therapeutic. It's so amazing. I've only just recently, in the last 12 months, started journaling, and it has really helped me. And I got the idea when I started learning about Stoicism, about journaling. But you wouldn't be too happy if your private journals were then published as a book. Well, that's what happened with Marcus Aurelius. But they are indeed. It gives you an insight into the great mind of this leader. And indeed, you get a feeling sometimes that perhaps Marcus Aurelius, I've got stuck with this lousy job of being an emperor of Rome, whereas I really just want to be a philosopher. Anyway, you can see that he is very thoughtful, and you understand why he is considered one of the Roman Empire's best ever emperors. Now, another chap that I really, really enjoyed having read is Seneca. Now, Seneca never wrote this as a book. These were all letters. Seneca was almost like this life coach or individual therapist. And most of what is in Letters from a Stoic, they are simply letters to friends that he would counsel and give advice and support to. His friends trusted him. He was, by the way, the advisor to Nero for a while. And I am sure that Stoicism really did help him have to deal with one of the Roman Empire's worst emperors, in terms of Nero, or he eventually did become a very terrible emperor. And of course, we all know what happened to Seneca. Nero had exiled him for a while, and then Nero had asked Seneca to commit suicide, and that was the noble way of dealing with things. But soon after that, we know what happened to Nero. So it's very interesting. Now, how did I become interested in Stoicism? It was simply sometime last year. This book was only published last year. I was reading a review in The Guardian of this book, Reasons Not to Worry. And I felt, oh, this is perfect for me. I've got so much to worry about. And it was by Bridget Delaney. And I soon realized that this Bridget Delaney was sharing with us her journey of how she came across Stoicism. And she reminded us, remember, what is the key fundamental teaching of Stoicism about what we can control and what we cannot. Some things are in our control and some others are not. During the pandemic, guess what? Almost everything seemed out of our control. But one thing was in our control: how we reacted to the situation, our thoughts about how we react. And this is what Bridget Delaney is also talking about. So the pandemic was a good example of how it exposed our lack of our inability to deal with things when they are not or we do not perceive them to be in our control. And we know that rates of drinking, rates of mental illness spiked when everything that we thought we had control over was suddenly taken away, and not just taken away from us, but it was also subjected to harsh laws and penalties. And then there was the fear, of course, of catching this new deadly virus. Now, there are a couple of really good websites, and this is one of them. In the detailed notes, I provide you with a couple links to a couple of awesome websites if you want to know more. But I love this very simple summary of Stoicism. And it is simply acknowledge that we cannot control much of what goes on in our life. That's a fact. See that our emotions are a product of how we think about the world. Accept that bad things are bound to happen to us from time to time, just as they will to everyone else. You think, oh God, that's a bit negative, isn't it, way of dealing with things? But when you think about it, it's not negative at all. It will really, really help you deal with those challenges when they happen. See ourselves as part of a larger whole, not just as an isolated individual, part of the human race. And this is, by the way, my friends, where I think Stoicism is going, modern Stoicism is going off the wrong path. It's going into this Western idealistic approach of the individual is what counts. No, Stoicism is all about community. It's all about understanding that connection with everybody else. It's not just about the individual, and that's something very important to understand. Now, think of everything that we have. This is an interesting one, and I think about this a lot more now. Think of everything that we have simply on loan, and that one day it will all be taken back from us. Interesting thoughts to ponder. Now, as a philosophy, Stoicism can teach us resilience. It can help us to become better people, self-improvement, and it can also promote happiness, the true happiness, that is living in the present moment and in accordance with nature and being grateful for what we have. In that sense, Stoicism is such an incredible philosophy, and it is so relevant to modern life. And in that sense, it really does help us to deal with uncertainty, stress, and anxiety. And I talk about this, and I'm not going to go on too much about it, because I think that during the pandemic, so many of us had challenges that we were dealing with. But at one point, I thought, okay, Stoicism is like a philosophy for losers, for failures. And I think there's actually a book with it's titled as such. Yes, in a way, it's actually preparing us for failure, but it's not. It's not preparing us for failure. Stoicism isn't about learning to fail. It's how to deal with challenges that may lead to failure if it occurs in our life. And by the way, how do we even define failure? So first of all, Stoicism tells us that, well, failure is a natural part of life. Stoicism says, don't dwell on your mistakes, learn from them and learn to move on. Stoicism tells us not to give up and be persistent. It also tells us to view failure as an opportunity to grow. And it also, very important, don't take things personally. Don't blame yourself for saying that you're not good enough. Stoicism, the focus is on learning from our mistakes and moving on. Now, perhaps the biggest failure, dealing with fear that we have is dealing with grief, dealing with the loss of a loved one. Seneca articulates this very well in his work. Seneca says that grief hits people hard because we never anticipate it. We might see death and misfortune affecting others, and especially now with the media and access to all the online resources that we have, we see this all the time. But how often do you stop and contemplate, what if this was happening right here now? So we often neglect to think about that. We're used to seeing it everywhere else. Now, Seneca said this over 2,000 years ago. So in that respect, things really haven't changed. Humanity has not changed. And this is why, as a philosophy, it is so relevant now as it was 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, or only 500 years ago or so. Now, in this beautiful letter that Seneca wrote to his friend Marcia, who was grieving the loss of her son 3 years earlier, he speaks to her and he says perhaps things that maybe we prefer not to hear. Seneca says, Marcia, we are all vulnerable. Our loved ones will eventually die and could do so at any time. Whatever, and this doesn't go just for lives of our loved ones, but our prosperity, our security, everything that we have could be taken away at any moment by forces beyond our control. Even when things are really tough, Seneca, it is always possible. When things are bad, things could get worse. Okay, he's been pretty upfront here. How prepared are we to cope if luck turns against us? Would we react as calmly and indifferently as we often do when we see things reported in the news happening to strangers far away? Once again, this has probably been reworded, but this is exactly what Seneca said to his friends. We will act kind of calmly and differently if we just read about it as news, but when it happens right here, that's when Stoicism can be very helpful. Now, who is my favorite Stoic philosopher? I'm loving the work of all three Stoic philosophers, but there's something about Marcus Aurelius's work that I just adore, and I find him, he's also it's very easy to quote his work, and you've got to remember, as I said before, this was a personal private notebook that he would write in, and thank God that it was saved and kept, because it is some of the most powerful advice, beautiful advice that that is still relevant today. Now, he, in his book, talks about a technique that I thought would have been a contemporary technique. Who would have believed that he would have thought of this? I think it's referred to, the traditional technique as a view from above. And this means that nowadays, I was doing this when I was flying back home, and it was just incredible flying back home from the States. And I was looking out the window of the plane, and I just realized how insignificant and how small we are. And in doing so, it just made any anxieties and fears and worries just dissipate. But Marcus Aurelius suggested this view from above as a way to help you appreciate how insignificant and small we are, and how small our personal troubles are in relation to the greater universe. It's amazing, amazing insight. So this view from above, for example, it helps us see our problem in perspective. It helps to detach ourselves from our emotions, and we're able to gain a greater sense of peace and security. When we can see our problem in perspective and detach ourselves from the emotions, we experience this sense of tranquility and calm. When it comes down to a nutshell, that Stoicism is all about helping people to flourish. And there is a word that the Greeks had, ataraxia. Beautiful, beautiful word, which means achieving a state of inner calm and emotional homeostasis. This means understanding what is in our control and what is not in our control. And when we achieve this emotional homeostasis, ataraxia, we have this sense of ongoing freedom, and we have this freedom from distress and worry. Now, this has got me thinking once again, saying essential oils. What do they do? I believe that essential oils, if there needs to be a new definition for aromatherapy, I believe it's to help us achieve ataraxia. So, British philosopher A.C. Grayling, for example, I love this definition of ataraxia. So ataraxia helps us to deal with all the shadows and challenges that exist in life. Suffering, grief, failing, making mistakes, feeling guilty. It prepares us to deal with them. But also ataraxia is all about learning how to relax, learning how to have fun, and making the most of each day. And of course, Grayling uses the word because this is what allows you to flourish. Okay, so which essential oils or oils evoke a state of ataraxia? What is that one essential oil that allows you to achieve this absolute, almost this state of bliss, this state of happiness, a state of just being content with where you are? Epictetus goes on to say that when we express gratitude, we regain this sense of awe. Now, this is interesting because at the conference that I spoke in, I actually talked about that connection between aromatherapy and nature, and how being exposed to both essential oils and nature help us to experience this sense of awe. Now, gratitude is considered one of the most important virtues of Stoicism. Now, the Stoics understood that happiness cannot be gained by external events. Happiness is, they refer to as a state of moderation, free from negative emotions. In other words, they use the term tranquility. The Stoics, the Greek philosophers in particularly, came up with the term eudaimonia. And those of you that have attended my webinars on flourishing and on mental health, I've often referred to this word, and I use this term a lot in volume 3 of the Complete Guide to Aromatherapy, in the chapter on aromatherapy and mental health. So the Stoics once again said that eudaimonia is not something that you can pursue, achieve by pursuing wealth, fame, and power. Instead, we must work on ourselves. And working on ourselves, we have to work on 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. Wisdom is the ability to see the world clearly and understand what is truly important. Courage is the ability to face challenges and overcome fears, and temperance is the ability to control our desires and impulses. And on the other hand, justice is about acting fairly and justly towards others. Now, what I've done is I looked at these 4 cardinal virtues, and I've reinterpreted them, some of them, to create the grace, the tranquility, and wisdom. So how can, and this is just a little bit of an insight into essential oils before I talk about the blends, how can aromatherapy help us to cultivate Stoicism? First of all, essential oils help to promote focus and concentration. We need this to be focused on the present moment. We need this to cultivate wisdom. So here I've chosen oils like basil, begonia, lemon myrtle, cold pressed lime, peppermint, rosemary, pine, and thyme, just as an example of how the essential oils can promote focus and concentration. In doing so, help us to cultivate Stoicism, a Stoic mindset. Essential oils, of course, reduce stress and anxiety. And in order to achieve a Stoic mindset, we have to be able to reduce the stress and anxiety. So because while we are feeling stressed and anxious, we're not going to be able to focus on the present moment. And so essential oils perfectly do this. So all the soothing, relaxing oils like bergamot, chamomile, fregonia, lavender, geranium, orange, patchouli, sandalwood, and a ylang-ylang help us to reduce stress and anxiety. And in doing so, will help us cultivate a Stoic mindset. In order we need to achieve that focus and concentration. To achieve a Stoic mindset, we also need enhanced introspection. This helps to create a calming, relaxed environment. This perhaps is a time for self-reflection. It's a state of mindfulness. So here I've chosen the beautiful essential oils such as atlas, cedarwood, Buddha wood, fregonia, frankincense, hinoki wood, patchouli, sandalwood, and vetiver as an example of those essential oils that will help us to achieve a more mindful state. Stoicism it teaches us to accept what we cannot control. In the same way, I believe that what aromatherapy does is it promotes acceptance of our situation by helping us to let go of negative emotions such as anger and resentment. Those essential oils that I believe work so beautifully to help release that anger and resentment that we may be feeling. Oils like bergamot, geranium, grapefruit, jasmine, rose otto, rose absolute, sandalwood, and ylang-ylang can all help us to achieve this. Stoicism tells us to be compassionate towards ourselves and towards others, even when we make mistakes. Essential oils also, many essential oils promote self-compassion by helping us to be calm, peaceful, and love. Palmarosa, neroli, lavender, the rose oils, fregonia, and bergamot are all examples of this. So is there actually one essential oil that I believe embodies the essence of Stoicism? There probably are several, but there's one essential oil that I was drawn to, and I ended up using it in all three of the Stoic blends that I created. And that essential oil is, who knows what that is? Fregonia. Let me tell you why I chose fregonia as the essential oil that embodies the essence of Stoicism. Robbie Zeck beautifully describes fregonia when she says, fregonia is like the candle carrying the light of dignity, nurturing the spirit and helping us to come to terms to resolve any past traumas and unresolved family issues. Fregonia gently removes the scars from past emotional pain. Robbie goes on to say, fregonia helps to build illness. It allows us to enjoy life despite any illness, disease, or emotional discomfort we may be experiencing. That, to me, embodies all the virtues of Stoicism. So, the blends that I've created, grace, tranquility, and wisdom, are based on the concepts of the main Stoic virtues. Now, grace to me, it's a beautiful word that is not commonly used nowadays, but it embodies many things. It's not just embodying temperaments, it embodies resilience, it embodies compassion. So it reflects a lot of the actual virtues that are associated with Stoicism. Tranquility. We need that, or else we'll never be able to achieve the Stoic mindset. And of course, we need wisdom as well. So, what I had said before, hopefully you'll get an idea of how we created these beautiful, beautiful blends. So grace is a blend. The heart and soul of grace is rose. It's neroli, it's melissa, it's lavender. There's some fregonia, there's bergamot. Grace, of course, helps to reduce the stress and anxiety, but it promotes forgiveness, it enhances self-love, it boosts our confidence, and it just radiates feelings of peace and tranquility. It helps us to deal with those challenging times. Tranquility, on the other hand, it promotes a sense of calm. It helps us to deal with the anxiety and the stresses that we come across on a daily basis. So in this sense, there's some lavender in here, there's bergamot, there's petitgrain. Notice what I've done. These oils all work together with the lavender, but there is also some Roman chamomile. And there's fregonia again and frankincense. And you might notice as well that frankincense was also in the grace blend. On the other hand, wisdom. There's a depth to wisdom, because wisdom, we want to promote that clarity of thought. We want to create a more state of mindfulness. We want to trust our intuition. Wisdom allows us to be focused on the present, to let go of any distractions that we have, and to face those challenges with courage. Indeed, oils like the cedarwood, rock rose, they give us the strength to deal with any challenges that we may encounter on our life journey. But of course, we've added patchouli, we've added vetiver, because I felt that to be grounded is very important if we are truly to embody the Stoic virtue of wisdom. There is a small amount of rosemary and lemon, and of course there is some fregonia and there is some frankincense. I do hope, I'm so sorry, I was only wanting this to be a shorter presentation, but I do hope that you've enjoyed my journey into Stoicism and how I've infused it with aromatherapy. I think, as Marcus Aurelius says, passing through this tiny span of time in accordance with nature, and come to your journey's end with good grace, just as the olive falls when it is fully ripe, praising the earth that bore it and being grateful to the tree that gave its birth. Now, to finish off, I hope that I have whet your appetite to delve more deeply into Stoicism. So please scan this code and it will take you to a blog that I have written, which gives you far more insight and depth into understanding Stoicism. But in the meantime, I do hope that you will enjoy the beautiful Stoic collection, which I personally, it's become my favorite collection of essential oil blends. Please enjoy. Thank you so much. By the way, are there any questions at all? Just on the chat, I would be happy. Aaron says use one blend at a time. I think I wouldn't go mixing all the blends. If you're going to use them in a diffuser, Karen, I wouldn't go mixing all three blends in a diffuser together. I would say, okay, what is the challenge that I'm going to be dealing with today? Do I need something that's more grounding and be more introspective? So do I need wisdom today? I'm going to have a really crazy busy day. I need some tranquility. Or I'm going to have to deal with some serious challenges today. It's going to be difficult to me to talk to these people, talk to family members or work colleagues. I need to do it with grace. So Karen, choose it intuitively. Well, okay, I do actually believe that oils, and we often say, look at better oils to diffuse during the day, in the morning, afternoon, or in the evening. there's no, like, for example, wisdom. Let's look at wisdom. There's a little bit of rosemary and lemon and wisdom, but I'd be still happy to burn that, diffuse that in the evening, and it's not going to impair your sleep, for example. So please feel free to use these essential oils any time of the day that you wish to focus on it. I would actually start by just doing a little bit of a contemplative practice to read while you're reading, while you're journaling in the morning or in the evening. The Stoics actually suggest we should journal in the morning and then also in the evening to look back at what happened to us during the day. So all these self-help things that you've probably learned over the years, they all originate from Stoicism. It's amazing. Look, thank you so much. Please take care wherever you are. And I will look forward. I will be traveling to Sydney and Melbourne and spending time in Brisbane in the coming months. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all soon. Please take care and please enjoy the beautiful Stoic collection. Thank you so much.